Hello! In this video, we're going to discuss the political argument for the existence of God. Don't worry though, I won't be talking about any current political events. This channel is only for uncontroversial things, like the existence of God. This argument is almost entirely not a joke, but not quite. I include that warning for arguments which are either bizarre or have some big flaw. And this argument does have a fatal flaw, and is also bizarre, but I still want to share it for two reasons. First, I find it to be an incredibly interesting argument, and secondly, maybe my presentation will inspire someone to come up with a better argument. So here we go. We're going to start by making some basic assumptions. The first is that any human God creates is going to have libertarian free will. This means that in any circumstance, humans have the freedom to choose between alternative possibilities consistent with their nature. The second is that Molinism is true. God knows how we would use our free will in any circumstance. I call these assumptions because I'm not going to be arguing for the truth of them, even though I think that they are by far the best accounts of human freedom and God's omniscience, and are probably the true accounts if theism is true. Now, let's forget everything we know about the world except for a few simple facts. First, that governments are a thing. Second, that God, if he exists, cares about influencing the way governments behave. Thirdly, God cares about more than just the way governments behave. He cares about other things as well. Now, given just these facts, what kind of government would God prefer humans to have? We're going to look at this question through the lens of political power. By an individual's political power, I mean that individual's ability to influence the behavior of the government. Different governmental systems distribute political power to individuals in different ways. So our question is simply, which distribution of political power allows God to most effectively bring about his plans? Well, given Molinism, we know how God would get individuals to exercise their political power in the way he desires. He knows how any individual would freely use their political power in any circumstance, so he simply puts humans in the circumstances where they use their political power in ways that God wants. And that's all fine and dandy, but there's a problem with this. God isn't just concerned with the government. He cares about other aspects of human life too. Let's look at the case of Alice. She is deciding whether to marry Bob or Charlie. She is also deciding whether she wants to influence her government towards war or towards peace. Let's say that God wants Alice to marry Bob and wants her to use her political power to move the country towards peace. Now, God may run into a problem here. What if no circumstance that Alice is put in causes her to make the right decisions? Any circumstances where she chooses Bob, she chooses war. In any circumstances where she chooses peace, she chooses Charlie. Well, God can get around this. What he could do is redistribute all of Alice's political power to someone else, say Dana. Now, even though Alice's marrying Bob is accompanied by a decision to go to war, this is inconsequential. Her decision means very little. Now, God could just focus on Dana's political decision, and everything turns out in accordance with God's plan. Extending this logic, we find that governmental systems that centralize political power would be preferable to God. Systems like monarchies, oligarchies, and dictatorships allow God to influence the affairs of humans with greater ease. He can focus on ordering who we will marry, where we will work, and so on, without needing to worry about how that influences our political decisions as much, and then separately focus on putting a government's monarch or dictator in the proper circumstances to influence the course of the government's affairs. And another point altogether is that such systems allow God to move governments in directions that it would be hard to get large portions of people to agree to do. Now up to this point, we've just been theorizing, thinking about these things without looking at the outside world. Let's now take off our blindfold and see how well the outside world correlates to our theorizing. Wow! In the world we see a lot of monarchies, oligarchies, and dictatorships throughout history. So the predictions of theism have been verified. Cool. Now I want to quickly point out that this doesn't mean that these governments are morally good. They may be morally evil, and we may actually be obligated to fight them, but God allows them because God can bring about greater goods through them.
Well, hang on there. Doesn't that mean that the existence of democracies, which evenly distribute political power amongst individuals, is evidence that theism is false?
Well, no, our theorizing doesn't entail democracies are impossible. It may be that God finds that all individuals in a particular nation happen to use their political power in ways that don't conflict with his will. So God would have no problem with making that nation completely democratic. Our theorizing does entail that this should probably be a rare event throughout history, though. Secondly, This objection doesn't actually apply to representative democracies, where populations elect individuals to make political decisions, because God can influence the government just as easily by putting the elected officials in the correct circumstances. Now, I want to point out that this argument is biblically based, too. Proverbs 21 verse 1 says, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, like channels of water. He turns it wherever he wants." There are even biblical examples of our logic playing out. In Exodus, we find a government with practically all political power allocated to Pharaoh. God put Pharaoh in circumstances where he freely chose to resist God, much longer than anyone else around him thought wise. This allowed God to show himself as much more powerful than the global superpower of Egypt. He therefore established himself as the strongest entity on earth. That's all pretty cool in my opinion. And now for the fatal flaw in this argument. You might have already thought of it. It seems that evolution can also be used to predict the existence of the political structures found on Earth. I'm not sure how it would be done, but it seems to me that it could be done. So, since this can be argued with unguided evolution, any theistic political argument can be met with an atheistic political argument. How could we salvage this? Well, first we could attack the evolutionary account of political structures as inferior to the theistic account. Alternatively, one could argue that the theistic account makes wider and deeper predictions than the evolutionary account. I myself, however, lack the historical knowledge to do this. Alternatively, the political argument can be relegated to arguing against non-theistic, non-evolutionary worldviews. I don't think there are a ton of those, so this wouldn't be a great option. If there are other options, I'm not sure what they would be. If you have any ideas, let me know. But at the very least, I hope you found this argument interesting. That's the end of this video. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. Thank you for watching.